what was your call to adventure? What's taken you from the life you had before growing up to where you are now, running hundreds of miles and knowing all these people that you assume do marathons?
So like you said, like, I can't pinpoint like one thing. I know my like origin story is in like, this is how I got into ultra running. Very short, boring story. I used to run half marathons. My friend Amy was like, I want to do a marathon. Do you want to do one with, like, do you want to do it with me? Milton Keynes, terrible. Like, awful. Just like going back in blocks. So I was like, yeah, sure. But I had a half marathon the day before in Sunderland. So she came up, saved my family. My dad lives in the northeast. So went and did the half marathon, drove back down, stayed in a hotel, didn't really eat properly, got nothing right. Went and did the marathon, and I'm usually a faster runner than her. And it got to like 14 miles, and I was like, my back is in cramp. Like, what is going on? Because I was running a half marathon pace in a marathon, like slightly slower than my half marathon pace in a marathon. And I was like, I had no concept of what I was doing. It was just like bimbling along. And then as I was about to stop and cry, like genuinely stop and just walk and cry, I heard, Naomi. And I was like, what? Like, nobody knows me in Milton Keynes. And it was Amy. And I was like, oh God, like, what am I doing? Like, Amy's caught up to me. Like, have I slowed like right down? She was actually running pretty fast. She'd done really well. And I was like, I think I'm going to cry. Like, my back is in clip. And she was just like, let's just run together. So we ran together, and then it got to like 20 miles and we walked quite a lot, and it got to 20 miles and I was like, oh, actually I feel okay. But I was like, my little angel of a friend like completely saved me. So I was like, I'm gonna we'll stay together. So we finished our run together, and then I was like, oh well, I need to redo that. And then I did another one. It was Leicester Marathon, which is also terrible. And there was a train in the middle of the run. I was like, why am I stood waiting for a train to cross the road in the middle of this run? And I knocked like 30 minutes off. I think like my first marathon was like 4:25. My second marathon was just under 4 hours. And I was like, that was still rubbish. Then I went away to Canada with the army for like 8 weeks. Didn't really train. Came back and I'd signed up to the Eden Project Marathon. And I came like fourth female, but didn't know till the end when this woman came over and was like, oh, well done, good running. I was like, oh, thanks, you too. And she was like, oh, I like literally just took third from you. And I was like, I had no concept of what's going on. So I was like, oh, okay, if I've done that with no training, and that was still like 3:50. And I was like, if I've done that with no training, then like maybe I should do another one and like actually think about it. So I went to sign up to another one and I couldn't find any because this was at the end of the year. And then I saw the Endurance Life Racili Ultra, which was like 36 miles maybe. And I was like, cool, I'm just going to do that instead because it's in the time frame. So I went and did that, and that was my first ultra, and I was like, this is me. Like, I'm here. Like, this is my love place. Like, I love this. Really enjoyed it. So that's how I started doing ultras. And then the next one I did was the vegan Welsh 3000s, which doesn't exist anymore. Like, the Welsh 3000s exist, but the vegan Welsh 3000s as a race doesn't exist anymore. And I went and did that. And before I'd signed up to it, and like a bunch of my friends, the only people I knew that had done it was one of my friends knew a climber that had done it. And they were like, oh, they didn't even finish it. Like, and my friend's an amazing climber and he didn't finish it. And I was like, oh God. And then another friend said that they knew someone that had walked it over like however long. And I was like, what have I done? Like, who do I think I am, coming from doing half marathons, just randomly thrown in like 3 marathons, doing an ultra, then being like, yeah, I'm going to go and climb in the mountains in Snowdonia. So I went along to a couple of recce weekends. I went along to one recce weekend, met some really cool people. My friend Roland, who we're still friends with now, and was like, okay, this is going to be okay. And then me and one of the guys from work, so I lived in Donington, like Midlands at the time, and me and him used to drive down on a weekend, I just bought a map of Snowdonia, so we take a map and compass, and we drive down like 6 o'clock in the morning, and it was when you could park at Pen y Pass with it it wasn't what it is now, right? Like,
Yeah.
you could just drive up, park, run. So we drive up, run around the mountains, like, just doing any kind of route. We take sandwiches for our lunch, and, like, when we got tired, we'd look on the map, figure out where we were, and then run back to the car. Like, that's what we did as training. And I did the run, and I ended up doing it with a girl who was running with somebody else, and her husband, not husband anymore. And he had all of her kit, so she had no kit. So when it came to the actual race, I'd met her on the recce weekend, so she ran with me, and she was like, "Can I stay with you?" And I was like, "Yeah." And I was like, "We need to meet this one cut off, and then after that, like, we can, like, chill out the pace, but, like, we have to meet the cut off." So she's like, "Right, fine." But after that, she was pretty much like, "I'm not running anymore." But she had, like, nothing. I was like, I can't leave this girl in the middle of the mountains on her own.
Yeah.
So we finished it together, but we pretty much, like, walked the whole thing. And that was like 16 hours. So I was, like, out there for like 16 hours, and I was
Is that like the actual Welsh 3000s route as well?
Yeah.
That 16 hours is still good.
Yeah.
Like, that's a brutal route.
And that was my second ultra.
That is insane.
And I just kind of thought, like, I had a lot of time to think. And I just thought, like the clag had come in, and, like, you know, like, it had been hot, and then it had been cold, and, like, da-da-da-da-da. And I just remember being like, this makes me feel at peace. Like, all the chaos is gone. Like, this is one thing that I can do that nobody can take away from me, and I can just think and be me and make my decisions and deal with all the situations, and, like, the chaos in my head is, like, quiet. So I was like, yeah, like, this is my thing. But then obviously nothing is ever good enough, is it? Like, you do things and then you're like, oh, now what? Like, so then I just started pushing distance, and I'm not I'm a fast-ish runner in that, like, I do quite well in some races. Not always because I'm necessarily, like, the fastest, but I'm maybe the, like, quicker at the time. You know, big fish, small pond, that kind of thing. But I did come top 10 female in the UTS 55k. So also sometimes, like, bigger pond, I'm still okay. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, I'm still all right, but I'm not, like, super fast. So I was like, well, if I'm not gonna, like, speed is not the thing that I want to be better at. So I was like, I need to, like, just push the distance. So I was like, I'm gonna try further. Did 100-miler. My friend was meant to run it with me, but got injured. So Roland, you know, the guy that I said that I met at the recce, and, like, who'd actually waited around for me and my other friend to finish the, like, Welsh 3000s. He signed up to the 100-miler with me, like a week or two before. Like, no, like, literally, like, just signed up and was like, can't let you do it on your own, your first 100-miler. Like, I'll do it with you. So he actually did it with me. And it was the, like, hobo pace 100, so it's pretty flat. You finish on a horrible field that's, like, really, like, rutted, like, really hard and rutted. And I was like, why would you finish on this? And I wore road shoes, like a brand new pair of white road shoes. And not necessarily because I had no idea that I should wear trail shoes, but I think I'd, like, looked at the route and I was like, there's a lot of tarmac, and there's a lot of, like, proper trails, you know, like, not, oh, you're going into the wilderness, like, you don't know what you're running on kind of trails, like, a lot of paved trails, like, so I was like, yeah, this will be fine. And I'd ran in those road shoe, like, that type of road shoe was what I just wore for road running all the time, and I had to get a new pair, so I was like, oh, well, like, timing's bad, but, so I just wore this, like, brand new pair of, like, bright white road shoes. Ran this 100-mile with my friend. We got to 50 miles, and he was like, Naomi, we need to slow down because I cannot do this. Like, this pace is ridiculous. Like, we need to chill out. And I'm glad we did. And then, did the 100-miler, sorry. And, yeah, just kept, like, adding on.
What's the furthest distance you've done now, then?
200. For my 35th birthday. Thanks, Reese. Yeah, Wild Horse 200, so, like, the first South Wales one that was, like, 2 years ago. How old am I now? Yeah, 2 years ago. it was my birthday present to myself.
Nice.
Yeah.
Quite a birthday present.
Love it.
I'm not sure most people would choose that, but...
Yeah. And so I'd actually tried a 200 before that. I tried Race Across Scotland, which like has just happened last week. But I'd been... So like during COVID, I'd been in Belize for 7 months. And so I'd just been like training in like 35 to 40 degree heat, like 95% humidity, flat roads, and had already signed up to Race Across Scotland, and then came back, and I think I overthought it because I read a couple of like race reports of people that had done it, and I was like overthinking how, like what shoes I needed to wear, and like da 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 da, and I completely wore the wrong shoes. So I think like a combination of like wearing the wrong shoes, and probably obviously not doing any actual training on trails for 7 months. I got injured, like freak injury in the first like 50 miles. So like the front of my ankle just started swelling up, and I was like, what is going on? And like was painful. And I was running with my friend Alan McCormack. So because of COVID, they set everyone off in like pairs. And I was just like, I'll just like chill out at the back. Like I've never done this before. I don't know what to expect. Like it's a long cut off. So I was like, I'll go for the cut off. So me and my friend Alan was there, who I'd met on the Vegan Welsh 3000s. So like hadn't seen him for years. And then we were like, let's pair up. So we paired up, and then we were running together. And I was like, Alan, like my foot is like, it's really sore. So we slowed down a bit, and then like I didn't trip, I didn't fall, I didn't do anything, but like it just kept getting worse and worse and worse, and I was in so much pain. And I was like, Alan, like I don't know how I'm gonna like do this, because this is really painful. And we got all the checkpoints wrong. So one of the checkpoints had changed, and I was like, oh, the checkpoint's there now, and these guys we were running with were like, no, it's like here. And I was like, no, I'm sure they said the checkpoints have changed. So we got to like where they were saying the checkpoint was, and we were in the middle of nowhere, and we were like walking, like barely moving at this point in the night. And I was like, the checkpoint's not here. And I was like, the checkpoint's where I said it was, in like 3 miles or something, 2 to 3 miles. And they were like, oh, sorry. And I was like, I need a minute. Like, you guys go on, like, I need a minute. And I just, like, was walking along, like, crying, just like, why is the checkpoint not here? Like, I need to get off my foot. And then, obviously continued. Like, there's nothing you can do, right? You're in the middle of nowhere. Like, the only option is to just continue. So got to the checkpoint. So it started at 50 miles. The checkpoint was at 68 miles. So for 18 miles, I'd been just, like, hurting. Got to a checkpoint, and I was like still way under the cutoff. I was like, man, we can see what happens. And the medic was like, maybe it was a sleep station, but I hadn't planned to sleep. And he was like, maybe like stay for an hour, like put your foot up, put some ice on it, we'll see what happens. Like hopefully it'll go down. I was like, yeah, cool, because it wasn't a proper injury, right? Nothing had happened. No. So lay down, didn't get any sleep, because like these places are noisy, right? Like people are coming in, and people are trying to be quiet, but you can't be. And also I was freezing, so I lay down with my like waterproof jacket on top of me, and I lay there for an hour and like looked, and then I was like, nothing seemed to be happening, and I was like, oh, it's fine, like I think the next checkpoint was at like 96 miles, and I was like, that's nearly 100, like I can do that, and then maybe do like a few more miles, and even if I can just get 100, like I've still got loads of time. And I went to put my shoe on my foot, and it wouldn't fit. And I was like, oh, okay, then. And, like, realistically, like, I could barely walk. So, like, I should not have been like, yeah, I'll just go and try and get to 96 miles. Up, like, I think what was meant to be the hardest part of the course. But I was like, yeah, no, it'll be fine. Went to put my shoe on. I was like, it won't be fine. Because I didn't have an alternative that was bigger than the shoe that I had on. So I was like, how am I going to do this with no shoe on? And I was like, I can't do it. And I sat in that checkpoint for hours refusing to give that like tracker back. Like Alan went on, and And I was like, just in my head trying to figure out like a workaround of like how I could do it. And I was like, I literally cannot. And then on the way home, so my car was in the northeast at my dad's. I'd stayed at my sister's, who was going to come and meet me at the end of the race, but because I'd obviously finished early, I wasn't at the end of the race. She was at a wedding. My parents had COVID. So I had to like get a train from wherever I was to like near home, then like walk home, sit in the garden and like wait for my boyfriend at the time to come and drive from Wales to come and pick me up, because I couldn't drive my car, and drive me back to Wales, and I had to leave my car there and had to go back like a couple of weeks later to get my car. I was like, this is insane. So you'd think then that you'd be like, let's not do that again. And I was like, I need to do better next time. So it was just like, I think sometimes you see what people do and you're like, oh, they're like, everyone's smashing everything like all the time. And you forget that actually people are not smashing it all the time. Like, you don't see all these tiny little things. Like, there was an old dude, I was trying to get on the train, and there was like a proper old man with a walking stick who was like, after you, my love. Because I was like walking slower than he was and more, you know, like treacherous than he was. And he was like, you need to get on first, you know, and like completely humbled me. So then I was like, yeah, I need to do this again. Obviously.
Completely humbled, yeah. But I'm doing it.
I was
better.
like, you were terrible, so you need to do this again. And then I saw like Wild Horse came up, and I was like, and it, because it's close to home, I was like, yeah, done. Like, that's me. I'm going to try it again. And then did it, but I think I definitely held back more than I probably would have done had I not had that experience in Scotland, because I was, in the back of my mind, I was like, is something going to happen again? Like, can you actually do this? Because whilst I always presume I can do something, like, I do still have those doubts where I'm like, yeah, but like, are you being stupid? Like, can you actually do this? Or like, are you just being an idiot? So up until 68 miles, I was very much like, is everything going to be all right? So probably took it like easier than I maybe would have done. I was running with some lovely people as well, so like was actually just having a lovely time. Got to that like checkpoint, similar distance, I think it might have been like 69 miles or something, similar distance, and it was a sleep station. I was like, oh, I'm not sleeping. So once I passed that, I was like, oh, I'm good. Like, yeah, I was like, I've got it now. Like, I've passed the point of failure last time, so whatever comes next, like, I will be fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then took like a 3-hour break 18 miles before the end for fun, just because it was my birthday. And everyone was like,
what a way to celebrate. You know what, 18 miles before finishing 200, I'll just take a 3-hour break, treat myself. I know,
like, we were on the side of the road, and I got to the checkpoint around like 6 a.m. in the morning, like just before 6 a.m. in the morning. Right, I'd had a bit of an issue with my stomach, so I'm not very good at eating on ultras, and I'd eaten pretty well because it was a slow pace. I'd like eaten pretty well, kept more food down than I normally would, which is great because that's what you need for 200. And I was like, I'd basically been having to carry my own poop in dog poop bags, because I was like, the guy that was doing my crew, we'd lost my what's those tablets that you take, like Imodium, lost my Imodium. I'd messaged, I was like, I need to get some Imodium, and he was like, I don't know where it is. So we'd lost it, and I was like, oh no, my stomach is like gone. So obviously you're not meant to leave anything behind. I didn't have a shovel with me, and I was like really trying to wait until I got to the checkpoint, and I was like, I'm gonna have to go to the toilet, I'm gonna have to and actually my friend, I was like, here's a bag of my poop, like putting it in bins, like, you know, like through these like towns. And then it got to this checkpoint, and I was like, I can hold on to this checkpoint. And I spoke to the woman on the checkpoint, and I was like, where's the bathroom? She's like, oh, it's a 10-minute walk that way. And I was like, I haven't got 10 minutes in me. So I was like, right, okay, I have not got 10 minutes. So she was like, oh, like, I was the only one there. So she was like, oh, like, if you go along, like, the side of the road, like you could probably have a wee like next to the bushes and like no one will see, because like sunrise was just coming up, and I didn't want to say to her, that's not what I need. And I like went to these bushes, and I was like, I can't physically make it like 10 more minutes because my body thought it was now. So I was like walking along these bushes, and there wasn't a bush to hide behind. I was literally just next to a bush next to a road. So unfortunately went to the bathroom and then was like, oh, I need to just like get away. So went away anyway. Had my 3-hour break, like had a full change of clothes, had 2 breakfasts, my first cup of coffee of the whole race, like was having a lovely time. And then I was like, oh, where are my headphones? Like they're not in my pack. And I was like, oh, the last time I remember seeing my headphones was when I was trying to find a bush. So my friend who was crewing for me, he was like, you need me to get your headphones? And I was like, well, because I didn't have any shoes on. And I was like, well, my headphones might be right next to a pile of poop. So I was like, do you mind? Or like, do you actually like, I can just put shoes on. He was like, it's fine, I've got it, I'll go. So my friend went to find my poop and my headphones, came back with my headphones, but he did say, he was like, there was nothing there. So like, hopefully that means like my stomach was so bad that it was like nothing remotely solid was there. But he's like, I didn't see anything, but here's your headphones. And like, I mean, that's true friendship, right? You don't get that. You won't get that on anything other than an ultra. And yeah, so I had a lovely time, took my 3-hour break, and then they were like, you need to go now. And then I ran the last 18 miles, and they were the fastest miles of my whole race, because I'd had just a complete reset. I had like a 30-minute sleep, loads of food, just a reset. And I was running so fast to the point where the guy that was crewing me couldn't catch up with me because of the windy roads. He was like, where are you? And like he'd try and turn up and I'd already run past, or like he'd see me at a distance and be like, hi, and I was like, no, I'm good, like I don't need anything. So I like ran, like you go like up a hill and then down a hill, and I was running up the last hill at the end of 200 miles.
That is insane.
Just having a fantastic time on my birthday. Just like, happy birthday to me. So yeah, that's the longest I've done, which I want to go back and do again, because I was like, I don't feel like I'm a 3-hour break is not like, you know, we need to be doing that nonsense. So I think I want to go back.
Over how long in total did it take you?
77 hours, 51 minutes.
Oh yeah, you definitely don't need a 3-hour break.
You don't need a 3-hour, and it wasn't a 3-hour sleep. It was just a 3-hour like hangout in the back of my mate's car, like having a lovely time.
Did you sleep at all in that time?
Yeah, so the whole race I slept 3.5 hours. So I slept like, so 96 miles, you get to, there's a checkpoint that's like a double checkpoint. So I think it's like 86 miles, and then you do like a 10-mile loop with a reservoir, and then it's 96 miles, and then it's a sleep station. So I was like, okay. And I think that might be the second, or at the time might have been the second sleep station of the race. But I was like, I don't need to sleep before 100 miles. 96 miles is close enough. So went round there, and then said to my friend, I was like, I'm going to I think you could have like 3 hours or 3.5 hours in the checkpoint. So I was like, I'm going to maximize this and have like 3 hours sleep. So I was like, come. And so I had 2 people crewing, Adam and Mark. So they went off to like go and have a coffee and let me sleep in the back of the car, because I didn't sleep in the sleep station because I'm a really light sleeper. So I was like, eye mask, earbuds in the back of a car rather than like in the sleep station, but it was in the same car park. And I woke up like an hour and a half later. They obviously still weren't back, because the plan was for me to have a proper sleep. It's the first time I've slept during a race, so I had no concept of like what I needed to do. Slept for an hour and a half, woke up. I was sleeping in one car, but all my kit was in the car that they'd taken with them. So I was like walking around this car park in a dressing gown and flip-flops, like just like no signal, so couldn't even say like, hey, I'm up, you want to come back? So they were just like hanging out in the car park in my dressing gown like an absolute lunatic, because the toilets, the portaloos were right at the top and I was right at the bottom, so I'm just like walking around like la 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 la, don't mind me. So slept for an hour and a half then, and then I was waiting for like a work friend of mine to come, and he was going to run like 7 miles with me. That was my first pacer, and weirdly we'd only met, like this is what like is good about the running community, like we'd only just met, so I was on pre-deployment training to go to Mali with the army at the time. So like my training for the 200-mile was mental because I couldn't really train. Well, I did train, but I couldn't train how I wanted to train. But I'd met him on this pre-deployment training, and I was told him what I was doing, and he was like, "Oh, I'll come and pace." So he just came down and like paced 7 miles with me along like the Brecon Canal. So yeah, like just had a lovely run. But obviously I was then waiting for him, because we'd given him a certain time, and waiting for my stuff. So I had a longer break there than I probably like needed to. So I had an hour and a half then, and then there's another checkpoint. I can't remember what it's called. So my memory's like terrible. My short like memory's really terrible. But we got to another checkpoint. I think that was like 146 miles in, and like it's. You go like through your second night and you're like into the next day, and it's the one where they've got like amazing food, and they had like amazing like vegan chili and stuff, and this like big tent. And again, I slept in my mate's car, but there was a sleep station there, and slept there for an hour, and then was like, yeah, like I need to go again. But I remember leaving there and walking up a hill with, so Mark was pacing me, the guy that was crewing me, he paced me for the next section. And I remember like walking up the hill and just being like, I'm so tired. Like, even though I just had a sleep, like, you know, when you, like, your eyes are like closing, but you're still moving. And I was like, how am I walking and my eyes are closing? Like, and I was like, I'm really tired. And I was like, but, like, I can't do anything about it. So just had to get through it. And then another friend, Laura, had met me. So he dodged off a little bit. And then my other friend, Laura, who I met through my first ultra, she came down and paced with her dog through the night. So she did a little bit, and then obviously I got to this, like, then Mark took over from her, and then we got to this like the 18 miles before the finish. So at that point I'd had 3 hours, no, an hour and a half, 2.5 hours sleep. Okay, so I only had like 3 hours sleep the whole time, and then that's when I had my 30-minute sleep, and I was like, refresh, like, done. And that's my birthday. Happy birthday to me. So I slept 3 hours through the whole thing.
That's 3 hours over 3 days, averaging an hour a night.
Yeah.
And you're running through it. Like,
yeah.
How do you even realise that you're capable of that, and that's something that you're willing to do?
I think it goes back to, you know what I said before, where I just think everyone can do everything. I think I was just like, oh, like, it doesn't matter, because the cut-off's like 5 days. So I had like 3 ideas in my head of like where I wanted to be. With like the best scenario was like finishing on my birthday. And I actually finished at like lunchtime on my birthday, or just either just before or just after lunchtime, I can't remember which. My best scenario of what I thought was possible was finishing on my birthday. So like, you know, I exceeded what I thought, but I did think, as long as I can get through that first 68 miles and nothing happens, I was like, I've got this, like, I've got days, it'll be fine. Don't really know what to expect. I'd heard about people sleeping for like 20 minutes at a time and stuff, but like, I'm not a very good sleeper in life in general. So I never had a sleep plan, like, oh, I'll have a minute here, I'll have a 20-minute nap there, because it takes me a while to get to sleep. I find it really difficult to stay asleep, just in general. So for this, I was like, I will try to sleep, and when I wake up, like, I'll set my alarm for the longest time that I need, but when I wake up, I know I won't get back to sleep, so that's me, get up and go. And obviously that was shorter times as the race went on. And I know people are incredible and do like 20 minutes and then they're like, cool, yeah, like, refresh, done. But for me, I was like, I'm just going to see what happens. And that's what happened. Like, yeah, just an hour and a half, and then an hour, and then half an hour. But I don't get, so this is when I also found out that I don't get hallucinations and I don't get illusions. So obviously hallucinations, seeing things that aren't there, illusions, seeing things that are there but look like something else. But I don't get either of those things, no matter how tired I am. And so before Scotland, I'd read loads of things about people seeing clowns and people seeing, and you know, like, everyone listens to Courtney Dore, and she talks about like leopards and trees and like stuff.
The man with the cello, that one always sticks with me.
Yeah, and like you see people. Who was it on Barclay Marathons? He was like talking to a postbox or something.
Yeah, I know the story.
Yeah, so like I've been reading all these race reports before Race Across Scotland, and I was like, oh my god, like my head's full of some like mental stuff, like yeah, I was just like, what is gonna come up? Like, what's gonna come out of my head? Like, is it gonna be something really scary, and I'm just gonna like completely ruin this for myself because I'm gonna see scary things and not want to continue, especially if I'm on my own, because I get scared really easily. Like, I don't watch horror movies. If there's a film or like a show late at night and they put adverts on where like there's scary stuff, I'm like this. Like, genuine, like I'm not even exaggerating. I will close my eyes and block my ears because I can't do what I want to do. Like, I love running like dawn dusk time, when there's no one around. I love running at night in the woods. Like, now I do. I haven't always. And I can't do those things if I see anything that's scary, because I'm a proper wimp. So I was like, oh God, am I going to think of something scary and it's going to ruin the race for me? But nothing, like absolutely nothing the entire time. And I was like, okay, this might be my advantage, is that I don't have that stuff to think about as well. And I don't know whether it's like, you know, people who get hypnotized and they say like some people can't be hypnotized because they don't believe in it.
Yeah.
And I don't know if in my head I don't have these things because I'm so hyper focused on not wanting them and being so scared of them and being like, oh God, what's going to happen? Then I don't know if my brain has just gone, it's not going to happen, because you're so focused on it.
Yeah.
Then your brain's like, nah, mate, don't worry about that. I know, I've realised that makes me sound crazy.
It's a really cool way of thinking about it though, because I have had, like, recently had like illusions and hallucinations from doing stuff. Yeah. And I wasn't doing it over 3 days. Yeah. So like for me, I'm like, I wish like I had that power. It sounds amazing.
Maybe concentrate. Maybe I've cracked something. Maybe you need to like concentrate on thinking like, what are these illusions going to be? And you'll be thinking about them so much they don't happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, because my friend Roland, like when we did the 100 miler, he had illusions on that, and we took like 25 hours to do it. And like towards the end, you kind of come down and to the right, and like there's a hill up to the left, and he was like, oh, we need to go up there. And I was like, I think we came, because it's like out and back on a bit, so I was like, I think we came from like down there yesterday. And he was like, no, like I've just seen those 3 guys that were in front of us like go up the hill. And I was like, I don't think so. And I was like, well, let me check it out, because he was suffering a little bit more than I was. So I was like, I'll go and check it out. So I like ran up this hill, jogged, went up this hill to go and check, and I came out and I was like, roll, like there's nobody there. I was like, it's that way. So we went the way, and then like as we came around the corner, we saw the guys that he thought had gone up the hill, and I was like, huh, that's interesting. And that's the first time I'd been with someone. I'd been around that in a running like kind of situation. Like that's the first time I'd been around somebody who'd seen things that weren't there.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, okay, that happens to people. I didn't know when it happened. I'd heard Courtney Doyle, but I didn't know at what stage, like for normal people, it happened. And since then, I've talked to loads of people who were like, oh yeah, I get them like all the time in my 100 milers and blah blah blah. And I'm like, nope, nothing, ever. Don't have space in my brain for it. It's too full of other stuff.
That's fair. I'm like fascinated by this whole 200 miler thing now, because in my head I've always been like, yeah, 200 miles, like that's achievable. But the more I'm like listening to people talk about it, I'm realizing like how big a thing it actually is. Like
massive.
3 days. It's just, I can't imagine doing it for 3 days. Like I'm about to do my tire flip marathon next week.
Yeah.
And the idea of doing that over 48 hours, I'm like, oh my God, am I even able to do this? And it's just like, oh, you're doing stuff for 3 days.
But I think that'll be more painful. Do you know what I mean? As in, like, running is running, and actually, you know, towards the end, it's not really running. It's like mooching along. And you're using different muscles, especially with trail running, you're using different muscles, and it's not the same. Like, I'm terrible at road running because it's so consistent. And I think, like, your tire thing, because it's the same thing over and over and over again, I genuinely think, like, that would be harder than going and doing 200 miles. I'm really helping you here, aren't I? You're like, well, thanks, I've not done it yet. Thanks for the fear.
I don't know. It's just... They're different. They're, like, quite hard to compare.
Very hard,
And it's just... Like, I'm in a weird place with it right now, because I'm at a place where I've done, like, 6 hours of tyre flipping for, like, just a training session.
Yeah.
And I felt fine after it.
There we go.
And it was, like, it was a bit hard at the time, and this was, like, a couple of weeks ago when it was really hot.
Yeah.
And there was a point where I ran out of water, and I was just like, why didn't... Like, I brought, like, literally one 500ml bottle with
ridiculous.
me. And then I was like, I'm going out and back, so I'll just top it up every time I get back. And I was like, I've got another 500ml bottle in my car.
Okay.
So then when I got back the first time, I was like, I'm just going to swap the bottles out.
Yeah.
And then I was like, I'm going to go the other way, because it's, like, quite a long path. I was like, I know it's half a mile there, half a mile back. I don't know how long it is this way. I know it's longer and it's uphill, but then surely going downhill then makes up for it then being uphill.
Yeah.
Which makes sense in running.
Yeah.
It doesn't work with tyre flips.
No, because then you have to control it, I guess, if it's going downhill. Like, do you have to, like...
No. It works quite similar, but it was just...
But
when
you're
going
still doing
uphill,
that action, aren't you? Like, you're still...
Going uphill, it's harder because you then have to, like, push it further to get it up.
Yeah.
But I didn't think about on the way down. I was like, I'll flip it and it'll be less to push. But you have to then almost do like a deficit deadlift because you're higher than the tyre is. And it's marginal.
Yeah.
But when you've got used to a flat surface...
And when you're doing it for how long.
So then that massively slowed me down. And the first section was all shaded. Like, all the trees had overgrown. So I was in the shade. And I went the other way and it wasn't all shaded. And I finished that water so quickly. And then I was like, even if I go back, I've got no water now.
Yeah.
But, like, even after all of that, I was fine.
Yeah.
And I was like, it's not going to be that bad.
See?
But then, at the same time, like, when I explain that to people, they're like, that is mental that you can do it for 6 hours. And I'm like, I'm about to do it for 48. So, but then I think back, and I'm like, it's not that hard. But when I first did it, I managed 16 tyre flips, like, in total.
Yeah.
That's not that many.
No.
And my back was hurting, and I was like, okay, maybe this is quite a hard thing to do. Like, that was only 6 months ago. And I'm just like, which one is
months
it?
And now you're like 6 hours in.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, you start from like, everyone starts from nothing. Like, so if people probably look at my Instagram now, they're like, oh, okay, like, she's always doing these, like, long runs and she's done this forever and blah, 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 blah. Because Instagram didn't exist when I was shit. Not saying that, like, where I was at was shit, but as in, like, so I joined the army and I was the, like, last person at the back of every single fitness session. So I didn't fail any of my fitness tests, but I was at the back of everybody. And then I went to, like, phase 2 and I was like, oh, this is crap being at the back of everyone. And, like, there was a guy, like, shouting at me. We were doing a tab, so, like, weighted Bergen weapon up this massive hill, which I know if I go back now, it's not going to be a massive hill. And this guy instructor was, like, shouting at me. And I was in front of the, like, jack wagon and he was shouting at me and he was like, Benson, like, you need to fucking get up there, blah, blah, blah. And in my head, I thought, you're an asshole. And I was like, I'm not further back than I need to be. As in, like, I'm not behind the jack wagon. He was like, if you don't get up there faster, like, you'll go in the jack wagon. And I just thought, do you know what, I'm going to, like, prove a point to you here. So I slowed down to just in front of the wagon. And I was like, no, this is what not trying looks like. And I was trying, but I was just way behind everyone else. Like, originally, I was way behind everyone else. And in my head, I just thought, no, I'll show you what not trying looks like. And he was, like, raging with me, like, obviously just shouted even more. And I was like this little 19-year-old with a proper attitude, like, just, you know, thought I knew everything. You don't, you're an idiot. But I was like, how dare you, like, shout at me and make me feel like crap because I can't do what everyone else can do. Like, I'm not failing, so, like, leave me alone. So, like, yeah, I slowed down till just in front of the wagon and just, like, he was raging. And, like, he called me aside afterwards and was like, I know what you're doing, like, blah, 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 like, just shouting at me. And it's funny because, like, people who remember me back then, like, now and again will make a comment on something. So, like, I did my first or second ultra. I've done an ultra and I'd posted on Facebook, and a guy who I won't name because we are still friends, loosely, he'd commented saying, oh, can't pass your CP course, so can you? Because I'd failed. So I used to be RMP, I'm now environmental health. Sorry for everyone in the army. People hate the RMP. And I'd done my CP course and I'd failed on the last day. Like, got a stand-up fail. Actually hadn't failed the fitness test. But because I had failed that course, instead of being like, oh, this is amazing, look at what you've achieved, he was like, I can't pass that though, can you? And I was like, what knob? Like, why would you do? And then, like, some people were like, because ultra running wasn't that big a thing when I started doing it. Like, I was always the youngest person there. I think I was like 24-ish. Maths is terrible. Around that age. And I was like the youngest person there, and like just completely looked like I was out of my depth. You know, like was running with like a backpack rather than like a race pack. Not that it matters, but like just had a little backpack and was taking my sandwiches and just, I don't know, like hadn't thought too much about it other than like, oh, like I just run this distance and I try and eat something and blah blah blah. So like someone had commented being like, oh, look at that pace, and I was like, yeah, but look at the hills, like stop being like, oh, look how slow you are. And it felt then like I was like, oh god, it's like being back in, you know, like I feel like I'm improving, but then there's still people who are like, like you're crap. And I was like, cheers for that. Now I just delete those people. I'm like, gone, like leave my life. But I think like people see, you know, people who haven't known me back then, and those comments are few and far between now. You know, like another friend of mine had commented saying like, oh, like something about like, I think it was after Arc of Attrition, was like, look how far you've come since basic training, like nearly 18 years ago. And you know, that was obviously in a nice way, but I forget that people still remember that, you know, because like other people are like, oh, like look at how good you are, like look at what you're doing. And I'm like, yeah, but I started from like nothing. Like this has taken me 10 years to be here and I'm still improving. I completely ruined myself on the plague last like 2 weekends ago. Completely humbled myself on that race. And so still 10 years in, like I'm still learning, I'm still making mistakes, I'm still finding things hard. But I think sometimes people forget that you've come from nothing. And I forget myself that I came from nothing. You know, I'm like, look at what I can do. Like, I'll just sign up to this and not think about it. Like, my sister was over for, she lives in Texas, and she was over for a few weeks. And she was like, oh, what are you up to next weekend, like, after they left? And I was like, oh, I've got 100K in Cornwall. And she was like, and you're just ready for that? And I was like, yeah. Because I didn't really run, like, I ran, like, once a week for 3 weeks while she was here. So obviously I hadn't been training. And she was like, so you can just go and do that? And I was like, oh, yeah. Like, it's just 100K. Like, you know, like, 19-year-old me would never be thinking that I'd be going, oh, it's just 100K. Yeah, and then it kicked my ass. But it's
weird how, like, our own perception works, because obviously we know what we've come from in that sense. And it's like, we've come from nothing and we've built up. And at the same time, when other people, like, when people look up to me and they're like, look at what you're achieving right now and training for this Thai marathon, they're like, that is incredible that, like, you're even capable of doing that. And I'll look at it myself and be like, yeah, but this is years.
Yeah.
This isn't like 6 months I've been training for this, like, specifically, yes, but look at everything else I've done building up to it. And look at, like, when I was a kid, like, I wasn't out flipping a tyre. No. Like, I hated exercise as a kid. I was the least active person I knew. Like, I wanted to be a, like, game developer growing up. And now my life is fitness. But my brother was always the fit one.
Yeah.
So then it's like I've come from like being this really skinny little computer nerd that just spent all his time indoors to now doing this. But then at the same time, I find it hard giving myself credit for being able to do these things. So it's like I have come a long way.
Yeah.
And I can see I've come a long way, but I can't appreciate it sometimes.
Yeah.
And it's just weird having that like dichotomy going on in my head at the same time.
Yeah. I mean, it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool to do that, and like then you'll be able to like tell everyone that you got the record. I presume it's a world record. I presume nobody like somewhere else is doing. I mean, maybe America.
From all I can find online,
Is that one?
There was one other person has done this marathon tire flip.
Yeah.
But they had like they went and slept and.
Okay, you're not.
They did it over like, I think it was like 3-4 days.
Okay. Oh, they had like a proper sleep. Not like
they went and slept and then came back to it and carried on.
Yeah.
Whereas I want to do it more like an ultra. Like that's how I've been thinking about it in my head. It's like I want to make it like an ultra where it's like you can sleep, but there's a set amount you can sleep for.
That's what I thought you were
can't
doing.
go home and.
Yeah, I automatically was like, oh, that's what he's doing.
Yeah.
Like, I just put everything in ultra. I'm like, yeah, it's a tire flip ultra, so he won't go. Like, what are you going to do? Like, sleep there?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what I presumed you would do, just like have a little nap.
Yeah, I think the guy that's done it, and there's no like records or anything. It was just like a local newspaper wrote an article about it.
Yeah.
And it was just like I'm pretty sure it was on his land.
Oh, okay.
So like he did it like round his garden essentially, but it's like a massive garden.
Yeah.
And then he just went and slept, and then came back out.
Okay. Yeah.
And then carried on.
Different concept, I guess.
Yeah.
Have you got someone like have you got someone supporting you, or are you literally going to be sleeping next to your tire on the side of the road?
My coach is coming down.
Oh, nice.
There's going to be like a few people just popping in and out sort of thing. I'm really bad with logistics.
Yeah.
I'm awful with all of this stuff.
Yeah.
I'm really good because I support other people do challenges.
Okay.
So I've had like one of my clients did the 3 peaks and I organised all of that.
Yeah.
And I actually like my friend comes around quite often, and the night before, this is how last minute I am. Literally like 11 p.m. the night before, I had to be at the gym to meet her to pick her up at 7 a.m.
Yeah.
I laid out all of my kit on my sofa bed downstairs.
Yeah.
And I was just looking at it being like, have I got everything? Like, and I was just like, oh, Sam, can you come here a sec? And he was like, why? I was like, just come here. And he came in and I was like, looking at this, because he's really into mountains as well. He got me into doing the Welsh 3000s.
Okay.
And I was like, have I got everything?
Yeah.
And he just looks down, he looks up at me and he was like, Will, are you serious? And I was like, what have I missed? Am I being stupid? Like, that was how my brain was working. He was like, this is the most organised I've seen you for anything ever in life. Like, I think you'll be okay.
Yeah.
And I was just instantly relieved. I was like, yeah, you've got a point. Usually I just go up like shorts and t-shirt and be like, yeah, this is me, I'm doing it.
Yeah.
But no, it's for someone else, so I wanted it to be done
You wanted
properly.
it to be right, yeah.
So yeah, that's what I'm usually like, is I want to do the tire flip thing. I hate planning around it.
Yeah.
I feel like I need like a manager
to do like a PA.
Yeah, to do it, and then a fundraising team as well, because I'm awful at that.
Yeah.
And I was talking to someone yesterday and they were like, yeah, like you should be like going around to all the local businesses being like, what support can you offer? Like going into like the local Tesco's or Aldi and being like, oh, like, do you want to support at all? Because they've got budgets for charity work.
Yeah.
And they'll probably give you like loads of water for free and snacks and stuff.
Oh, fair.
And I was like, yeah, I haven't thought about that. Like,
no.
I just post on socials that I'm flipping a tyre and I just hope people donate.
Yeah, hope for the best. Yeah.
I've done better than I ever have.
Yeah.
I've raised like over 1,500 so far.
Nice.
But my goal's 10 grand. And I'm just like, I'm now stressed because I haven't raised 10 grand.
Yeah.
I haven't planned it. I don't know who's coming and when.
Yeah.
And I just want to flip a tyre at the end of the day.
But I guess you don't need to like worry about like as long because you know you're just doing it, right? You don't need to worry about like people will show up and then you'll be like, oh hey, like nice surprise.
Yeah. I also don't know why anyone wants to show up. Like, I've been struggling with this in my head because, like, my parents have been like, yeah, we'll come down and support. I'm like, you live in London.
Yeah, you're like, what are you going to do? Just stand and watch me?
Yeah, and then, like, I coach gymnastics, and a load of my gymnasts are like, yeah, we want to come down and, like, see you do this. And I'm like, I'm flipping a tyre for 48 hours back and forth. It's not going to be the most exciting thing.
Yeah.
And then at the same time, I didn't think about this, but my coach was like, you're not going to be able to have time to stop and chat to everyone that comes to support you. You've got to be in the zone. And if you have to tell them to leave, you have to just tell them to leave.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I understand that, but, like, some of these are, like, kids.
Yeah.
Like, they're, like, 10-year-olds that want to come and support and be like, wow, this is amazing what you're doing.
Yeah.
How can I not stop and talk?
But I guess, like, maybe, like, beforehand, like, you could... Is there a way that your coach could be like, let people know when your break's going to be? You know, like, if you know in a half an hour you're going to have a break, then maybe, like, while you're having a break to eat, you can chat to them then. And, like, people will understand as well. Like, don't get me wrong, like, I completely get it. This is why I do most of my races uncrewed, because ultra running is not a spectator sport. Like, you want to see me to go, hi, bye. I did wild horse crewed mainly because, so I was going to do it uncrewed, but I was messaging my friend and I was like, I've got a couple of people who have agreed to pace, but I can't figure out how to get them back to their car. And, like, this is a problem. I wasn't thinking about my race. I was like, how am I going to get them back to if they're running from there to there, like, how am I going to get them back to their car that's 30 miles away, 15 miles away, whatever. And he was like, I'll come and crew so that I can drop them back off for their stuff. And I was like, oh, okay, thanks. And that's how I end up with a crew. And then Adam, like, who was the owner of, like, Trail Events Company, he was like, I'll also come down. So that both of them ended up crewing for me. And that's how that came about, because I was like, I can't figure out how to get my pacers. And I only had a few pacers, but I was like, I can't figure out how to get them back to their vehicles, because I'd messaged Reese and was like, is there any train line? Like, how, like, you know, like, how could I get this to work? And it was essentially the trains would only have worked right at the end of the race, you know, because it's in the middle of nowhere, obviously. Yeah. So I was too busy stressing, thinking, and then I was like, well, cool, I just won't have any pacers, because I can't take on that stress and think, like, how am I going to get you back? So my friend was like, I'll do it, like, gone. And then the Arc was the only other one that I've had someone crew for me, and that was because my friend, so he's not an ultra runner, but he's a runner now. Wasn't a runner when I first met him. Now he's fantastic. Like, it's really annoying because he's just, like, so quick. Like, we message all the time and he's like, no, you're a beast, like, blah blah blah, but actually, like, he's barely been running, like, not that long, and he's, like, smashing his marathon time, like, way faster and stuff. And he was going to do his first ultra this year, but it was meant to be a Trail Events one of the ones that hasn't happened. But he was like, looked at the race I was doing, and he looked into it, like, way more than I did. And, like, I was like, oh, Arc of Attrition, that's one I always wanted to do. Like, this is the time that will work for me. I'll do it, signed up to it. And hadn't even realised that it started at lunchtime. Like, I don't look into details until just before. Like, I just did Plague, and I only realised it started at midnight because a girl, Fran, who I'm meeting this weekend for a run, she was like, oh, it starts at midnight, and I was like, hadn't even looked at that yet. But he was basically, like, had heard that it's a bit of a party to crew on the Arc, so it was like, can I come down and crew? It sounds like it's, like, cool. And I was like, yeah. And actually was really thankful that he did crew, because crew does make it easier. Like, I think, you know how in Top Gear they have, like, the time on, you know, when they do the time on the track and they've got, like, the conditions and they put, like, whether it's wet or whatever. Yeah. I think on races they should have, like, whether you've been crewed or uncrewed, because it makes a massive difference. Yeah. Like, I
have always thought that, to be fair, is like, there needs, like, just like with, like, a lot of FKTs, they've got the crewed and uncrewed distinction.
Like, supported and unsupported,
and it's like, they should have that for races, because
makes a difference. Like, and I'm not saying, like, oh, have a different, like, results list or anything like that, but I do think, like, it does make a huge difference. Like, I always run with a bladder, like a full bladder, like 2 to 3 litres, which is obviously 2 to 3 kilograms. And then on Arc, I ran with 2 500ml bottles, because I could swap them out all the time.
No.
And, like, It was different on Wild Horse. I had loads of stuff because actually, you know, you can't meet people that often, but on Arc you can. And I absolutely had an advantage by the fact that my friend was there crewing, because it meant that, like, that's already a couple of kilograms you're losing by not carrying all that water and like food and snacks and stuff. I mean, I didn't actually really eat on the Arc. I survived after 10 miles. I pretty much survived on pretzels and satsumas. Yeah, like, I have no idea how that happened, but I did. And he turned up with like a smorgasbord of like food, you know, like we'd packed so much food, like everything, and he was like, here's like a platter, like, what do you want? I was like, nothing, here's swap my bottles over. But it massively helped just not having to carry those extra little, you know, you obviously have to carry your mandatory kit and stuff like that, so that's fine, but like the extras, which food and water essentially, then, and change of clothes, like Plague, I had to carry all my, like, I like to change my socks and different things like that. Like, I still do take like a spare pair of socks always, because you never know when you're going to want to swap it, but different things like more than one pair of socks, or if you wanted to change your t-shirt because you're running for like in the night and then in the day and like blah blah blah, all those extra things like massively add up. So I do think they need to have little like crude and uncrewed. Yeah. There's a race in Scotland, in the Lake District actually, in September that I'm hoping to do. So like the 13 valleys, but I want to do the 7 valleys because 13 valleys is full. And I can only sign up to races last minute because of work. I never know, like, very rarely know whether I'm going to be around. So, and that's 110k, and that's no crew allowed for anyone, and it evens the field. So that's why I want to do it, because I want to like do an even field of like nobody's got this advantage of not just like meeting you with stuff, but also like that morale boost. Like if you're feeling super low, then it's just nice to see a friendly face, I guess.
Yeah.
And like on the Arc, like I said to my friend, I was like, I can't stop to chat. Like, you know, like you said, like about chatting, and I was like, I can't stop to chat. And I think you need the right people to know that you can't. And like you said, if you've got like kids and stuff, like they're not necessarily going to understand that you going like, hi, is all you've got. But like I'd said to my friend, I was like, you know, I'm only going to be able to be like, swap out stuff. Hi, how are you? Like, hope you're okay. And then move on. And he was like, that's fine, I get it. And I think you need the right people to be doing that, to know that actually like they're going to see you for a brief second. They're going to put all this time and effort into, like you said, driving down from London and standing there and watching you like flip your tire back.
Yeah.
But actually they're not getting anything in return.
Yeah.
But I think people do know that, because people, you know,
I feel like you're saying, it'll depend on the person.
Yeah.
Whereas I feel like a lot of the people that have offered me support, like other than my coach, everyone else that's offered me support hasn't done anything to this level themselves.
Yeah. But neither had my friend. Like he hadn't. Yeah. He hadn't even run an ultra, and he got it.
Yeah.
So maybe you just need to like tell them in advance, be like, soz.
Yeah, I've been trying to, and I've been like, you really don't have to come.
Don't come out, yeah.
Like, and I don't feel like they understand like much about like the pain cave.
Yeah.
And like the depths that I'm going to be going to in my own head.
Yeah.
And the state that I'm going to be
moody?
in.
I
will be. I will be. Like I can't believe I'm going to say this on the podcast. I was on the phone to my mum, and she was like, yeah, me and your dad are going to come and support. And I'm like, I don't think you're going to want to.
Yeah.
And she was like, why? I was like, trying to be nice about it and be like, well, it's going to be like pretty boring. And they're like, no, we want to come show our support. And I'm like, I appreciate it, but I don't think you're going to want to see me in the states that I'm going to be in. And she's like, what do you mean? I'm like, I can almost guarantee I'm going to have multiple mental breakdowns throughout this.
Yeah.
Because the depths I'm pushing myself to, and where that's going to take me mentally. Like I suffer quite bad with my mental health anyway.
Yeah.
So I'm like, this isn't going to help it.
You don't want an audience of your parents for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she's like, what do you mean? You're not going to cry or anything? I'm like, 100% I'm going to be in tears for big chunks of this. Like, it's not going to be easy.
And crying's the least of what can happen.
Yeah.
Crying's cool. Like, I'm up for crying. Like, honestly, I don't cry at everything, but like, I do love a good cry, and I think it's good for you. I think everyone should like let that emotion out, like male, female, whatever. Like, but I think that crying is the very least of the emotions that can happen when you're in that really dark place.
Yeah, like, and just like on the 6-hour session I did, the blisters on my fingers were like pretty bad.
Yeah.
And I'm like, if I'm doing this like another like 7-8 times.
Can you wear gloves?
I can, yeah. I find it harder in gloves.
Okay.
Like you don't get properly. The feel of it, and getting your hand under it becomes harder. Like that minimal.
But you can wear those cool like fingerless gloves, you know, the ones.
I'm still going to get blisters because it's literally right on the fingertips.
Yeah.
And it gets like really bad.
And I guess you can't even put like chafe cream on because otherwise you're like slipping your tire off.
So I'm like, the state that my body's going to be in.
Yeah.
Like there's random things that I didn't think would happen. Like I get really bad like chafing on my arm.
Yeah.
From where it's rubbing against my leg every time I pick it up. I'm doing it like thousands of times. Like there's like really small things. I get it really bad with my lats as well. My arm rubbing against my lats, and I get all these weird chafing things.
You need to cover yourself in lube. Like, honestly, that's what you need to do.
Yeah.
That's what I do for ultras. I've got my like my little runners. It's called runners rub in a little tin, and I'm just like head to toe, like it's a moisturizer, like all over.
Yeah.
That's what you need to do.
Just the state that everything's going to be in, like my mind, my body. Like I don't think they realise what it's going to be like to see, and I don't think they're going to want to see me like that. They've never seen me like that before, so
okay.
Yeah.
But then maybe it's good that they do see you like that. Like,
I don't want it to get to the point where they're going to be trying to talk me out of continuing.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
That's what I think I'll find hard, because like even just on that call, my mum was like, "Well, don't do it then."
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's not the attitude.
Yeah.
Like I can't be hearing that like 2-3 weeks before the attempt, being like, "Yeah, you don't have to do it," you know. And it's like I'm already thinking that myself.
Yeah.
But I don't need other people telling me that.
It's hard, isn't it? Like, because you try and block out other people's opinion, because everybody has an opinion, and like everyone's entitled to opinion. Should you say your opinions out loud all the time? No. But it's obviously very hard to like block, especially if it's your parents. Like, it's not just some idiot on the internet that you're like, you don't know me, go away. And especially, I guess if they are not used to like seeing you like that, seeing people doing events like that, they're not, maybe they don't understand like why you do still have to go through, and you are still gonna like push through. I had some horrible messages before I did the ARC from strangers on the internet, like not understanding, you know, because like the ARC's quite a big race that everyone wants to do. Yeah. And that's obviously before it was like, now it's UTMB, but like for next year. But I had a 100k race in Texas that I'd signed up to like 2 years before, deferred because I was away with work, and then like, so I deferred, so this would have been like the 2 years since I was meant to run it. So deferred because I was away with work, then deferred because I was away with work, and then this was like the third year, but like 2 years of deferral. And then it just worked out, it was 2 weeks to the day before ARC. And I was like, meh, like, don't know what you can do until you try. So I was like, yeah, like, this is what I'm going to do. And I had messages from people who don't know me being like, how dare you? Like, who do you think you are? You're not an elite runner. Cool. Like, does that matter? Like, you're not an elite runner. Why do you think that you can do this? Like, you're taking a place off someone else who could have got into the race, you know, because there's only certain spaces and there's like a wait list every year. Like, you're taking a place from someone else. Like, you're not going to finish this and you're taking a place. And I was like, rude. Because like the trail community is lovely normally, and I was like, who are these people and how have they and it was like 1 or 2, like it wasn't people, like it was people but not a lot. And like I was like, oh god, like, but part of me was like, have I bitten off more than I can chew? Like I'd done one recce of the ARC, like an 18-mile section at night in the rain, and I was like, it's easy, it's fine. And then and then I was actually really ill afterwards, which was hilarious. So I was meant to do 100k the next day, and I like did the first 15-ish miles or something, and was like, I haven't eaten since like before I did the recce, so I was like, I'm not gonna do this. But yeah, like I'd done the recce and was like, that was not as bad as everyone's made out, and I was like, it'll be fine. And that was in like December, so I didn't really have a choice about not doing whatever. But yeah, like people were horrible. Like a couple of people were horrible, like, you've taken this from someone else, like you're not going to finish. And I was like, oh god, am I not going to finish? Like,
it's not even about finishing though, because there's loads of people that don't finish.
But I think it was,
and people don't comment being like, oh well, that was a waste
shit
of a space because
No.
you didn't finish it.
Exactly.
Fucking shame on you.
But I think because I'd probably come across as like quite blasé, because I was like, oh, I'm going to do this race and then I'm going to do this race. Like, I don't know whether that had got these people's backs up and they were like, you're not taking this race seriously. And yeah, like, if you are not going to finish it because you're doing this other thing, then you should have just let someone else have the space. And as it was, like, I did finish it and I did really well, so I was like, But like, I just deleted those. I was like, you're gone from my life. Like, I don't know you, you don't know me. It doesn't matter whether you're an elite or a back of the pack runner or anything in between. Like, that doesn't make a difference. Like, you don't know me, so bye. So deleted them. But like, I absolutely in my head was still thinking about their opinions, and I don't often think about people's opinions. Like, my stepmom said something funny to me when I was young. Like, said like when I was younger, she thought I was going to have no friends, because she was like, you were just this like crazy little whirlwind that just came in all like arms and legs, and she was like, you didn't really do what everyone else did. So she was like, and I had friends in school, but like I didn't start drinking when everyone else was drinking, and like if I wanted to do something, I would just go and do whatever I wanted to do, and I wouldn't necessarily be doing what everybody else at that age was doing and what was like cool. So she was like, oh, I was convinced that like you'd have no mates, and I was like, thanks. So I think, you know, I've always just done my own thing and not really cared about people being like, why are you doing that, what you're doing. But this time I think this time I did think, like, I was like, oh god. And then I was like, how dare you, like, how dare you, stranger on the internet, who I've probably classed as a friend. You know how I'm like, everyone on the internet is my friend, like this person's my friend, blah blah blah. I was like, how dare you, like, I've probably classed you as a friend at some point, and then now you're like sending me these messages, but you don't even know me. Like, you can think those things, and I'm not saying like don't think bad things. Like, people, I think bad things about people, but would I say it to them? No, because you don't need to. It's mean. Like,
yeah,
you just, I just like, that's unnecessary. No, you're in my head. Get out.
With those sorts of comments, do you feel like you use that as motivation, or do you prefer like the motivation to come from like a nicer place of like support? Like, which one do you feel motivates you more? People being like, you can't do that, just nothing, just
like, I prefer the motivation not to come from other people.
Okay.
Because I think, like, obviously I was like, fuck you, how dare you, I'm going to show you. But that was like a minimal time of like, I'm going to show you, because I was like, actually, you don't matter, like, no. And I always have so much support from like the trail community, regardless of whether I know, like, complete strangers. So like during Plague, I was like posting videos, and I was like, I'm really suffering. And honestly, like, I spent 16 hours, like just under 16 hours, I think I finished in, and I spent the whole time like not miserable, but like just telling myself I wasn't going to finish the run. And that, like, so I wasn't keeping any food in, which isn't normal for me, but this is what I was saying about how it humbled me, because normally I can do that and I'm like, meh, I've still done it. And I started running and I was like hot, and I was like, something doesn't feel right. And I had a t-shirt on under the vest that you have to wear, and I like pulled over at like a mile in to take it off, and I was like, nope, don't feel good. And it was like raining, and like it felt like a cool pack on my skin, like it was so nice. But I was like, I'm in a vest at midnight. Everyone was like, it is really hot, but I was like, no, I feel like I'm literally on fire. And like my stomach was really sore, and I was like, oh, we're gonna suffer. Like, and it's the first time you come do through like a little bit of trail, and then you come into onto a road with like a little car park, and like Ferg was there and Jane was there, and I think Jane was there, and from starting I was like, I don't know if I'm going to do this for, didn't know what the finish was. I didn't know whether it was like 60 miles, 62 miles or 64 miles, because people had told me different things. So I was like, but regardless, I was like, I can't do this for another 61 to 4 miles. And I was like, God, this is shit. And then I was like, it'll go, like, it'll be fine. So I always, like, if something hurts, I'm like, nah, you don't hurt, like, go away. So I was like, oh, it'll be fine, it'll stop. And I was chatting to people and like listening to people's conversation, and I was like, I'm feeling worse and worse and worse. And I was just gradually feeling like I was a little fireball, but I was like, thought I was going to throw up. It was really strange. And I've never felt like that awful. And I was like, and in my head, I'm like, I've never felt this awful. And I was like, what is wrong with me? And I hadn't done any like the training leading up to it, because my sister was over. So I was like thinking like, oh, is it because I'm out? And I was like, no, I've done stuff without being, I don't train properly anyway. So I was like, that's not it. And I was like, obviously I've eaten something that's messed with my stomach, and that's not ideal because it's happened just before a race.
Yeah.
But then I just spent the whole time. And then I met a guy called Matt who was running, who's like wife and kids were there supporting him. And I was like, I think I'm just going to, I was like, do you know what? Like, I'm not having a good time. I was like, I do this to have fun. I do this because it's fun. And I was like, I'm not having fun. I was like, I just feel like crap. I can't keep any food in. I was like, I'm gonna just stop at some point. And I was like, I like running the night. I was like, I'll wait till it's light, because I don't want to miss the night section. So I was like, I'll wait till it's light and then I'll stop. And then in my head I'm like, who does that? Like, that's stupid. And then I was like, oh, maybe I'll feel better when it's light. And the sun came up and I was like, I do not, like, because then you can see things properly. Yeah. And I was like, no, I don't feel better, I still feel bad. And then I was chatting to him, and I was like, literally spent like hours just basically telling him I was not going to finish. And I was like, I'll get to the checkpoint. So I got to the checkpoint before, and then you go out and do a turnaround and come back. So it's like 29 miles or something. And I was like, I'll go to the turnaround and come back, because I was like, I might as well do half the race. And I got back, and then I was like, if I DNF here, like, how am I getting back to the start? And I was like, oh, am I going to run back quicker than by the time I sit here and have a lift? And I was like, maybe just do like the next 8 miles to the next checkpoint. And like, not thinking in my head that that's like hours. And then I was like, maybe just do the next 9 miles to the next checkpoint. And like, people have said like, oh, did you know, like, once you were taking it off, did you know that you were going to finish? And like, genuinely, like, the whole time, no, still no. And there's like one point where I was like, did a video, and I was like, they said there's ice cream at this next checkpoint, like, there better be ice cream, I'm going to be sad. And there was like, yeah, and there was like ice lollies. But it was like a few miles before, I think maybe 4 miles before the finish. And even at that point, I was stood with my ice lolly chatting to Ferg. And even at that point, I was like, I'm so close, I could just not bother now. Like, I could just stop now. Because I still felt crap, and I just spent the whole time like talking to myself and just being like, I feel like crap, why, like, I don't want to do this anymore. Oh, I don't want to do this, like, at all, really. I was like, this is just awful. And then obviously got to the end and was like, oh, like, I did that then.
I'm surprised you even noticed you finished at that point. You'd just get to the finish and be like, so where's the next checkpoint? Because like, I might as well just get to that. And they're like, no, you finished. You're like, oh, okay, done. I'm done.
Yeah, but I did, like, the whole time I was like, this is crap. And like, there was no motivation, like, no inside motivation, no outside motivation. The motivation was the fact that I didn't want to wait for a car to come and pick me up, and I didn't, because you can't expect people, if you DNF in the middle of a race, you would expect to wait, right? You don't expect people to immediately come and get you and take you back to your car. You just know you're gonna have a wait.
Yeah.
And I just thought, oh God, is that wait going to be worse than like just continuing to the next? And then I was like, just like, oh, okay, well, if I go to the next one, then I'm closer for, like, so whatever that wait is will be less. But yeah, just spent the whole time being like, this is awful. I feel awful. And I felt awful the whole time. And then I got to the end and I was like, okay, so the good thing about that is that I haven't had a mental challenge in a very long time, like years probably, where I've like genuinely, it's kicked my ass. So I was like, okay, the good thing is that it gave me a mental challenge and showed me that I can still do hard things.
Yeah.
Not, like, I'm still doing hard things, but hard things that my brain thinks is hard.
Yeah. Things that almost seem unachievable to you.
Yeah. Yeah, and it did. For 16 hours, I was like, nah, in a couple of miles. So, the good thing is that it taught me that actually I can still do hard things and my brain can still control myself.
Yeah.
But I put like a video on and was like, this is me. I'm exhausted. Like, I am suffering. Like, da, da, da. And the amount of like messages that I got from people, just to be like, come on, like, you've got this. Like, you're a badass. Just like get through. Like, just, yeah. And at no point was anyone like, no one was negative. Like, no one was like, just finish it. Like, everyone was like, come on, you got it. Like, you're gonna do this, so just like do it. Like, not like quit complaining, but like, you've got this. Like, yeah. And, you know, from complete people, strangers, my internet friends, people who I know through Instagram, who I might not have met, or people who I know through Instagram who I have met. But yeah, everyone was just like, come on, you've got this. Like, which is not, like, and I wasn't reading everyone's messages because obviously I was like, just trying to get it done and trying not to slow down too much because I was thinking, like, if I slow down, I'll stop, and then when will I start again? But you know, when you like scroll down, you can see it all on like your screen. So I saw on the screen like the first line of people's messages, and I was like, well, at least I'm entertaining people, like posting these videos and stuff. Like, people are lovely. I'm getting all these messages, but it didn't make me think, oh, like, do it for these other people, like, do it because these other people think you can do it. I was just like, oh, this love is nice. Like, it feels like a hug in a message.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I guess maybe it did get me through, but I was just like, oh, hug, I still hate it. It's so crap. I'm not going to continue.
What you've just explained with, like, the pushing checkpoint to checkpoint, that's been my only experience in an ultra.
Yeah.
I've done one ultra, and I've done it 2 different years.
Yeah.
So I did 2019, the first one that I said that I didn't train for.
Yeah.
And then I did that same one again post ankle break and, like, everything I went through. I did it last year. And both times, it's only a 50k. Yeah. Like, I'm saying that.
50k is a 50k.
I know,
like...
but I'm saying it from, like, the same perspective that you have of, like, well, people have done 100 miles and 200. So in my head, that's the new marathon, 100 miler. Yeah. And I'm like, I haven't even done that. Yeah. So I'm like, yeah, 50k.
It's a warm up.
And I've just been going, like, checkpoint to checkpoint and filming the video same as you, but I didn't have signal, so I couldn't post them. But looking back over the recap, every video is me being like, just leaving the next checkpoint, I'm just going to go to the next one, like, I'm not going to finish this at all. I'm just going to keep pushing. And every time, like, getting closer to the end, I'm still like, I'm definitely not, like, going into the checkpoint. I'm like, I'm just coming into a checkpoint, I'm going to call it here. And I've got to the point where I've sat in the car that they're going to take me back. They're like, we're just going to have a cup of tea, like, just sit in the back, warm yourself up, we'll drop you back now. And I've been sat in the back, and then when they've got back in, I'm like, I think I'm just going to go.
Yeah, you're like, nah, I'm good. I've had a cup of, like, I'm good, I've had a cup of tea.
Yeah, and then they've just seen me hobbling off, and I've had it before where they've called over to me and been like, are you sure you want to keep going? I'm like, yeah, I'll see how far I get. Yeah. And they're just like, are you sure though? And I'm like, yeah, it's fine.
See, that's funny you say that. They're like, are you sure? Because I've only ever seen people being like, yeah, go on then. Like, do you know what I mean? As in, not just to me, but like to other people. They're like, yeah, crack on. You know, like, stitch you up, off you go.
Yeah.
Like,
I think they could just see the state that I was in. Like, that was on my first one, and it's in November through the Brecons. Yeah, so the weather's shocking. Yeah. It's horrendous every year.
Great. November's great.
That's my experience of an ultra. It's just sucking that much because it's cold. It's pissing down with rain. Yeah. Sometimes there's snow, and like on that first one, I tore my hip flexor at mile 6.
Okay.
So like at the first checkpoint, I'd torn my hip flexor.
Yeah, that's not ideal.
And then I'm like, I've still got to get to the bottom of Penavan, go over Penavan, and then run back to Merthyr.
But then you still did it. Yeah. Like, you still did the whole thing, so...
And I've just been, like, coming into, like, the last checkpoints, and they're seeing me, like, barely being able to shuffle because I can't pick my foot up. Yeah. And they're just looking at me like, I don't think you're in a state to finish, and you're shivering.
I've seen that so many times before.
Yeah. I literally finished within 1 minute of the cut-off, so that was amazing.
Amazing. That's what cut-offs are there for.
I used to hate that, saying that, being like, I was literally dead last. Yeah. But listening to Dan's podcast, I say listening, like recording it with him, and him saying like, no, you got full value. Like,
you got full value, yeah. Is it the Dragon's Back that gives the, like, last finisher, like, a bigger trophy? Because they...
Oh, do they?
I might have made this up, but I think I'm sure it is. I'm sure it's the Dragon's Back that, like, gives the... So the last person that does finish the whole thing, they give them a bigger trophy. I'm sure it is, basically to be like, you are the one that's like, you've tried the hard, like, no, like you've tried the hard, like you've put the most into this, like you suffered the most, like here you go, congratulations for being the badass. Because like the people at the front, yeah, they're suffering in their own way, but they're suffering quickly and then it's done, right? Like, if you're at the back, like you're the hardest of everybody because you are suffering for the longest and you get everything that's thrown at you. You don't just get the beginning bit and then you have to problem solve the whole way through that. Like, I think the people at the back are the hardest out of every single person. Like,
it's just when you look at it and you're like, this is how many days you've been running.
Yeah.
Like, when it gets to the point where you're looking at a race in days, yeah. I'm just like, oh my God, like, last place must be suffering so badly.
Yeah. But doesn't it just make you feel alive, like the suffering? Like, it reminds you you're alive.
Yeah.
Like, when the weather's, like, terrible and you've, like, got, like, icy rain at your face and you can, like, feel your legs are, like, hurting and you're just like, this is crap, but also, like, oh, like, just alive.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, I think it's amazing. That's probably why I keep doing it.
Yeah. I think it's going to be quite an experience because I've got the Rhythm now. So I've signed up to do the Rhythm, which isn't a middle of winter race where I'm going to be soaked and stuff. And I'm just like, and I know how well stocked the Pegasus checkpoints are.
Yeah, they are.
And I'm just like, oh, is this going to be enjoyable?
Yeah, it'll be fun. It'll be a lovely day out.
Yeah.
Just
and I don't think I'm ready for that. That's what I'm worried about.
Where's the suffering? The whole time you'll be like waiting for it. You'll be like, oh, when's the suffering coming? When's the suffering coming? And then you'll get to the end and you'll be like, oh. Like, next one, upon 100.
I say that as if I'm like, it's not 2 weeks after the Tyre Marathon, so I'm going to be suffering still. But yeah, just doing a race without it pouring with rain.
Yeah.
I'm just going to be like, where's all the bogs? I know there's going to be one bad bog because it's round here and I've recce'd it.
Do you recover well though? Like, or are you just going to take those 2 weeks to like literally just do nothing? And
I'm going to do
you don't know
as much as I can without pissing my coach off.
See, don't have a coach, don't have anyone to tell me off.
Yeah, I got it specifically for these two events.
Okay.
And the fact that when I realised they were so close together.
Yeah.
And, well...
How did your coach feel about the fact that they were both, like... Had you signed up to them, then got your coach, so it was already okay, cool.
Yeah. He thinks that my intentions on both are a bit ambitious, because it's not only I want to do the two, but I told him I want to do sub 6 on the Rhythm. And he was like,
how far is it?
50k.
Yeah.
My record's 8.5 hours on a 50k.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I'm only PBing by 2.5 hours. Yeah. It's not that bad.
Yeah. But also, no race is equal. Like, you know, the elevation could be different, and also you've got more experience in your like body now and in your mind. Yeah. So
there was that, but then he's also found out that in my head, I want to podium.
Okay.
And he's like, well, stop now.
Yeah.
Because he found that out very recently.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, yeah, I probably should have told you that. Like, I always set myself a goal.
Yeah.
And then whatever I've said, you know, in my head, I'm more ambitious than that.
Yeah.
And that, even if I hit that, I'm going to be like, well, I could have done better.
Yeah.
Like, people don't understand that about me because they'll be like, what's your goals? Like, I've had it no matter what I've done, like, weightlifting.
Yeah.
They've been like, oh, well, what's your goals? And I'm like, oh, in this PB block, I want to try and test and get 200 kilo deadlift.
Yeah.
And then I've done it and they're like, oh, wow, you hit your goal. I'm like, no, because my real goal was like 220.
You're like, that's just the goal I told you.
Yeah. And I always try and undersell my goals.
Yeah. But is that because you expect someone to do like what your coach has done and be like, oh, that's over ambitious? Like, is that why you undersell it? Because
I don't even know. I feel like it's me trying to be realistic in a sense and be like, okay, this is realistic. Because what I set isn't realistic.
But who gets to decide what's realistic?
Yeah.
Like, really? Look at what, like, all the different things that different people have achieved. And at some point in their lives, like, they would have thought that was not possible and that was overachieving or like at some point. So who gets to be the one that decides that it's not? And like, who cares? Like, if you have a goal and you're like, that's what I want to do, and you don't get it, like, who cares? Because is it better to try and not do it, or is it better to just not bother trying, and either way you still haven't done it? Do you know what I mean? Like,
it's something I'm like toying a lot with in my head currently, because the looming sense of failure with this Thai marathon is in my head, and I'm like, I'm trying to take the advice from like every podcast I've had. I've spoken about failure in some sense. Even before doing this, signing up for the Thai marathon, like, people are talking about DNFs, and they're like, we're trying to come from a point of I've tried and I'm learning and it's all a process. And I've never been like that. It's always been like, I failed. I haven't done the thing I've said I'm gonna do. And I'm trying to take it with like well, who else is trying to do this? Not many people.
No.
Like we were saying earlier, there's that one guy that has tried it, and I don't agree with how he's done it. So in my head, that's not the same competition.
Different.
And yeah, it's just, if I said I'm going to do this, I need to do it. Even if no one else is close to doing it. But like we're saying, no one else is trying. And if I get 20 miles in and my body's broken, is that going to be enough for me? I don't know if it is. And I'm trying to like figure out how I'm going to cope with that. So it's just looming constantly.
I guess like at that point you'll have to decide like whether it's more important to continue to finish that even broken, knowing that can have an impact on your next race, or whether you can accept, not even necessarily straight away, maybe in a year's time you can accept that was an okay place to stop and then still enable you to do the other thing. Like, and the only person who's ever going to figure that out is going to be you at that time. Or maybe not at that time, but yeah, when it comes to it. Because like, how far did you go in the 6 hours?
3 miles.
So are you working off like that timing slowed down, or? That
was a very generous pace that I was going at. I wasn't pushing at all.
But that's what you'll kind of want to do for like the whole thing, isn't it? Like, you won't want to be pushing it for the whole thing. So
I'm sort of trying to take that pace as that's probably what's going to end up happening. And that will be like 52, 53 hours without extended breaks. So
how long have you given yourself?
48 hours.
And then you have to like, and at that point, like, that's you've got no time left, or like, as in like, if you get to 48 hours, are you going to be like, I need to stop now, or are you going to be like, oh, I've got 7 miles left?
What it was originally, and this is what people find more impressive about what I do, which I find hilarious, is that was how much time I had between starting and having to be at work. So I was like, thinking. I need to be at work at 8 o'clock on the Monday. If I start at 8 o'clock on the Saturday, if I finish in the 48 hours, I'm right behind work, so I can walk straight through the door and start my shift. And they're just like, what are you on about, Will? Like, you're going to need recovery. And I'm like, I can recover, but I've got to work first. Like, it's a 4-hour shift. I can do a 4-hour shift. They're like, don't you have like a spin class to teach that day?
And I'll be stood there, not like, I'll be sat on the bike, not moving my legs.
In my head, I'm still doing a spin class.
Why can't you start on Friday?
Work.
After work. What time do you finish work on Friday?
I finish at, it's usually I won't finish till like 9, and I get home about 10.
Oh, okay, so.
But like, things have changed because it's summer holidays, so we're doing summer camps and stuff. So I'd actually finish at like 4
PM.
Why
which
was
you just
new
start
to
on
me.
Friday?
Well, I've now got all day Monday off.
Oh, okay.
So it does work out a bit better. My coach hates that I'm working Friday. He's like, can't you get it off? I'm like, no, I can't get it off. I've got the weekend off. I can't get more time off.
And now Monday.
Yeah,
okay.
But yeah, like every challenge I've done, like the first time I tried the Welsh 3000s, and I failed that hit me hard. I finished work at like 10 o'clock or like 9:30, got to my mate's house at 10 o'clock to pick him up, drove to Snowdonia, climbed Snowdon at like silly o'clock in the morning, barely slept, and then was like, right, we're off now. And we just started, and then we failed, and I was like, well, I've got work tomorrow, so I'm now going to drive home and I'm going to go to work tomorrow. And they're like, Will, you're broken. And I'm like, but I got to go earn money. Like, I haven't taken time off work for this. I've just had this allocated time slot. Which is why I've, funnily enough, picked the date, because I'm like, it's bank holiday. I get more time off.
Of course, I didn't even think about the bank holiday.
Yeah,
I mean, I do exactly the same as you. Like, I don't take any time off for work afterwards. And my office is on the 6th floor at the minute. So, yeah. I remember doing... so I did my first that 100 miler. And, like, obviously, like, started on a Saturday, finished on a Sunday. Was back in work on Monday. And so I'd been in the like MT department the week before, and someone was talking about this marine race, which is usually a relay. So it's 88 miles, but between 4 people in pairs. So 2 people do 22 miles the next and then swap over, the next 2 do 22 miles, then they have a sleep, and then they do it again the next day, and it's a race. And this guy was talking about he was part of a team doing the full 88. So I was like, oh, I'd love to do that. When is it? And he was like, oh, it's like next week. But so now it's later on, it finishes on a weekend, but this used to be during the week. So I was like, oh, like, I'd like to do that. Can I be part of the team? And he was like, yeah, sure. Turns out it was like 70 hours or 69 hours after I finished my 100 miler. So so I finished on the Sunday. And it was in Nottingham. I was based in Plymouth at the time. Drove Monday mornings. I start late, start at 10:30. So stayed at my friend Louise's house like midway. So drove my friend Zach, who was meant to be running the race with me. Actually, him and his friend met me at the finish, and he was like, "We've come to drive you back home." So he drove my car. His friend drove his car to my friend's, which is halfway down the country. I slept at my friend's house overnight. Like, she made us dinner, and then I just slept. And then the next day drove back to Plymouth. So the Monday went to work all day. Then, but I was like sat, because my feet were swollen. I was sat with my feet in like cold water under my desk, like an absolute lunatic. Because this was my first time. Like, I had no concept of what to do. I'd never had swollen feet before, and was like, this is what I'll do. So just sat with my feet in cold water. Then Tuesday I had to go to where the race started and stay overnight, and then Wednesday the race started, like the 88 miler that we did, and my feet were still swollen like the day that I started. Like, they just started, like the swelling had just started like dropping down, and then I ran that like Wednesday to Thursday, and then I went on holiday on the weekend. Like, flew to America for a 3-week trip. And then when we were out there, I was like, we were doing like a road trip from trying to think whether that was when we did San Francisco to... we basically end up driving through Death Valley, and I was like, even though I've just done this 188 miler, I was like, we need to go and run a mile in Death Valley. And then I was like, well, if we're going to run a mile, we might as well do a 5K. So I just... so
if you're doing a 5K, you might as well just do 10.
So, like, yeah. So, like, the week after these races, I was like... And, like, obviously it was easy. It was a jog. It wasn't a run.
Yeah.
But, yeah, just did this 5K in Death Valley just to be like, you can't come all the way and not do that. So I totally get not thinking about time off afterwards.
Yeah.
Because I don't ever.
I just think it's needed, and I've just always been like that.
Yeah.
I've never wanted to take extra time off, because I'm like, if I've got time off to take, then I can use it for another event later in the year. Yeah. But I just, with the work that I do now, with like coaching gymnastics, you can't just take time off. Yeah. Like, I work with like some pretty elite gymnasts. Yeah. And I'm like, you can't just take time off from their training.
No,
like, they're still in training. you have to be there for them.
You got people relying on you.
Yeah, so I'm like, I can't just take time off.
Yeah.
So I just use the time off I have to do the things I want to do.
Yeah.
And then, I'll just turn up and do my best there.
Yeah.
It won't be like 100% of what I'm capable of for them, but I'm there.
But it's, I guess you're thinking like it's better than not being there.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. I feel the same. No, I don't have people relying on me like that though. Yeah. Just normal work.
But like I was like that before I was doing this, and it was like I can take time off, and I'm like I just don't want to.
No,
like, I just want to. I'm in a routine. Like I'm doing this thing now. I'm back. Okay, it's routine. Yeah. Like what's the point in having a day off and sitting around?
And that's the thing. Like also, you're not going to do anything with that day off. So you're like, what a waste of a day because I'm not going to do anything. So might as well be at work. Like, don't want to waste a leave day to sit in my house and not. Because
I took a day off. I did a 50-mile barefoot walk across the Brecons.
Of course you did.
And I did take the day off after that.
Yeah, because you couldn't walk.
No, it was just I was like, I'm actually going to listen to people with this. Like, I'll have the day off.
Yeah.
Were you glad that I think it was like a bank holiday anyway, so I think I had that day as like I didn't know how long it was going to take me, so it was like I can go into this day if I need to.
Yeah.
And I just didn't need to. Yeah. Like I finished within 24 hours and that was having a 6-hour sleep.
Amazing.
And I was like, I don't know how I've done that.
Yeah.
Because I thought this was really going to take 2 days.
What route did you go?
So there's there's a race across Brecons. I can't think what the company's called, but it happened like a few weeks ago. It's 100 milers. Yeah, the GB Ultras one. This was complete coincidence, and I didn't plan this at all. I was going and supporting my coach do it because he's doing all 4 of the UK GB Ultras 100 milers this year.
Nice.
So I was like, I'll come and support because it's in Wales.
Yeah.
And I don't get to see you, so I'll come and support. And we got to the 50-mile-ish checkpoint. And it was middle of the night, and I was walking around, and I was like, I recognise this place.
Yeah.
And there's a video of me like sitting down on the rock that I was then sitting on, crying during the 50 miles, being like, oh, I'm broken, like I can barely move my foot, like I haven't done anything with my ankle post rehab since then.
Yeah.
And I was like, my ankle is just wrecked. And I was like, this is the rock I was interviewed on and I was crying on.
Yeah.
And then I was like, that's such a coincidence. And then I looked at the rest of the route and I was like, all of these checkpoints are the ones I used for my checkpoints. So like the second half of that route was my route, but in reverse.
Nice.
So I started at, I can't think what the place is called, but just the furthest point west of the Brecons.
Okay.
And then walked. Essentially, I was thinking it would take the whole of the Brecons to do the 50 miles.
Yeah.
But because I was going over so many mountains and then doing like switchbacks and stuff, I ended up getting to the base of Pen y Fan.
Okay.
And I looked at my watch and I was like, I've done it. And I didn't even know I'd done it.
Did you go up Pen y Fan anyway or no?
No. I was done.
Yeah.
Because I was...
Also, that's rocky, isn't it? Like...
Yeah. I have done Pen y Fan barefoot before. But yeah, I was like, I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
I'm done. Yeah. But it was the checkpoint before where I was like crying and everything, and I was like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this. My parents, that was the first time I had crewing.
Yeah.
But it wasn't really crewing.
And it was your parents?
It was my parents and
so
my friend Sam.
Suffer.
Not massively, no. Because they were all going to meet me at the start, and my friend Sam was going to be walking a lot with me.
Okay.
But my dad put dodgy petrol in the car, so the car broke down, and I was meeting them coming straight from work to start.
Yeah.
And then I was like, I'm just going to start without you. Just make sure you're at this checkpoint with my car because that's where I want to sleep.
Yeah.
And then after that, like, we'll just organise somewhere else to be. And they managed to get there in time. Like, it took them hours, but they sorted it out. And I was just thankful that my car was there because I was like, otherwise I'm just going to sleep on the floor. So then I had my 6-hour sleep. I called my parents in the morning. They're like, we're having breakfast, sorting ourselves out. We're going back today.
Yeah.
So we'll meet you. Like, where shall we meet you? And I was like, the next, like, easy checkpoint to get to is going to be Pen y Fan.
Yeah.
So I was like, just meet me there. And then that will be, like, almost like in my head I was like, that'll be like halfway-ish.
Oh, okay.
Like I think I'll be about halfway by that point.
Yeah.
And I get to the checkpoint before where I had a charity come out and they did like a little piece on me, what I was doing. And that's when there's the videos of me crying and stuff. And then I was like, I'm just going to get to the next one and then I'm just going to call it because I don't want people waiting around for me. I don't think I can keep going. I'll just get there. And I was tracking it on my Whoop, which is awful for tracking stuff. So I can't just look and check and be like, I've done this many miles.
Yeah.
And I had to do maths because I had to save the route from the day before.
Okay.
And it didn't log properly on the Whoop, so it's not like saved the route.
Okay.
But I knew how far I had gone by that point.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, so I know I've gone this far, but it hasn't saved my route, so I just know in my head I've got to do this maths.
Yeah.
And it was dying, my phone was dying and everything. And when it gets really low, it goes like that low light.
Yeah.
But it was really hot and sunny and I could barely see my phone. So I was like, I'm not even going to bother checking.
Yeah.
And when I got to the bottom of like the first car park, like Story Arms,
Okay. Yeah.
I looked at my phone just because I was going to try and get signal to get like them to come down and meet me because I didn't want to walk on the tarmac at that point.
Nice.
And I looked at my phone and I just turned to Sam. I was like, I've got 1% battery left, but can you just confirm that's the distance that it says?
Yeah.
And he looked and he was like, yeah. I was like, I've done it. Like, I had no idea. Like, I was about to give up, but I've just finished.
Yeah.
I was so paranoid for weeks after being like, did I actually do it?
Did I just imagine that in my head?
But then, luckily, you got the Google Maps feature where it, like, tracks you.
Oh, yeah.
And I looked, like, it came up at the timeline thing, being like, oh, look at your timeline for the past month.
And then it goes, this is your longest walk.
Yeah. And I looked at it, and I looked at the route, the 2 days routes of walking.
Yeah.
And I was like, I did 51 miles. Like, I did
Nice.
actually do it. I was so paranoid up until that point.
Nice.
I didn't want to post anything about it because I was like, I don't believe I've done it.
Yeah.
I think I've only done half, because in my head, that was halfway.
Yeah.
So...
Well, I mean, well done. I wouldn't do that. I
No.
like my feet. I don't want them trashed.
They were actually in really good shape.
Were they?
Yeah, there was no blisters, no cuts, nothing.
No cuts?
No.
How?
I honestly don't know, because there was a 2-mile section of just fire track, and I could barely move on that.
Like,
That
I
was the
love
point before.
I love being barefoot.
Yeah.
Like, I'm like feral with it, but like I don't think my feet would last that long. Like,
It really wasn't that bad. Like, the whole barefoot thing wasn't bad. The thing for me was I'd just walked 50 miles and I hadn't really done any training.
Okay.
And
yeah.
I definitely hadn't done any distance like that before.
Yeah.
So my body was just like, no, you going on uneven ground and rehabbing my ankle and everything. It was like, you're not ready for this.
The barefoot was like the lesser of two evils.
Yeah, and that bit didn't bother me. The only issue I had with my feet was the amount of times like grass would go in between your toes.
Oh, yeah.
And then it's just like little, like almost like paper cutty sort of thing. And it was just uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But like other than that, it was fine being barefoot. And that 2-mile stretch of fire track, which I will curse till the day I die.
You're like never going back there.
Oh, I never do. Like I was so glad I wasn't running the GB Ultras race, because I was like, I don't want to see that path again.
Yeah.
That
Although
was
it might
horrible.
be nice just to be like, I've got shoes on and I know what I'm doing now.
Well, Sam was doing it in Crocs and he was like, this is fine. I'm like, it's not fine.
Oh, like, I don't know. I don't get the obsession with Crocs.
No, he is obsessed with them.
It's a no from me.
I was like, if you had actually made it from the start with me, then like you probably would have got some form of record being like longest distance in Crocs, and I would probably say it's more impressive than barefoot.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, nah.
No.
I don't own Crocs, thankfully.
I'm glad it's not just me.
No.
Everyone is like, you need to get yourself a pair of Crocs. I'm like, I'm never doing that.
And people get those Croc charms as well. Like, it makes it worse.
Yeah.
It's like, what are you doing?
No, not for me. Not for me. I don't even know where I was going with that story now, thinking back, but it's
I'm
a
trying
nice
to think of the
story.
start. I know. I mean, I feel like I've done that this whole time. I'm just like, you'll ask me a question, I'll be like, I'm not going to answer that, but I'm going to tell you this other completely unrelated thing, and then at the end I'll be like, it sort of relates.
That's podcasting. I feel like we could do this all day.
Yeah.
But I will wrap it up here,
Yeah.
because I appreciate that you've had to come down to do this, and I hate taking time out of people's day.
No, it's fun. I mean, I can always talk about running.
So the last question I ask anyone on the podcast is, if you could set a challenge for the guests, for the listeners for the week,
Yeah.
what would it be?
Does it have to be like a physical challenge?
No, it can be
Okay.
literally anything.
I'm going to say do something that you think is impossible. So, like, it doesn't necessarily have to be something that you do this week, but you can sign up to something that you think is going to be impossible, or like have a conversation that you think you wouldn't be able to have with somebody, or accept plans that you wouldn't say yes to normally because you don't think you could do that. That's one. It's kind of broad brush, but that's what I'm going to say. Do something that you think would be impossible. Yeah.
Nice. I like it. If people want to go and follow you and see what you're doing next, where can they find you online?
So my Instagram is Naomi_B_running. I am on Facebook, but I don't. Pretty much my Instagram copies over to my Facebook. So yeah, mainly my Instagram. When I keep it up to date, just videos of me and my dog.
Amazing. Well, thank you for coming on,
Thank you.
I look forward to seeing what your next races
It's
are.
lovely to meet you.
You too.
I don't even know how long we've been here, but I'm sorry for all the words that just happened.
No.